Following the Mr. Ahmad Shahid's visit to Tashkent, Uzbekistan, what changes are observed in the country, do you think, in freedom of religion or belief?
What was important about Dr. Shahid's visit was really that he was given full access wherever he asked to go, including to the Jaslik prison in Pakistan, which is quite a well-known prison. He was given ability to meet with all religious minorities that he sought to meet, and he was able to come up with a very detailed report and set of recommendations.
What do you think are the causes that prompted the Uzbek government to adopt its own national development goals?
The resolution that was signed on 20 October empowers the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, to ensure that across the whole government these national goals and targets are taken seriously. So Uzbekistan committed to reduce by 10% its greenhouse gas emissions, that having a university degree doubled a Uzbek girl's chance of finding a job. I have to say, I think I'm the luckiest UN representative, because not only is this a great place to live and a great place to live with my family, but also it's such an exciting time to be in Uzbekistan.
Today we will have a conversation with the UN Resident Coordinator in Uzbekistan and the UNDP Resident Representative, Ms. Helena Fraser. Well, first of all, let me thank you for being kind enough to agree to spend your precious time on this interview. Well, you have been serving in Uzbekistan as a UN Resident Coordinator for more than a year by now, right? In July 2017, you arrived in Uzbekistan. Well, let me ask you a personal question, if you don't mind. How do you like the country, Uzbekistan? Because if I'm not mistaken, it's not the first time you're arriving in Uzbekistan, right? It is the second time.
Yes.
How do you like the country, the people, the environment, the culture in general?
Well, thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this discussion. I think it's really important to reach out through the media to talk about why the UN is in Uzbekistan and what we're achieving and what we're hoping to achieve. So I'm very glad to have this chat today. I first came to Uzbekistan in 1995. No, I take it back, 1993. And I was a student. I was on my way to St. Petersburg to live for a year, learning Russian and studying Russian literature and Russian political thought of the 19th century. And I really wanted to visit Central Asia. And of course, in 1993, the countries had only recently become independent. So it was a very exciting time to visit. It was an unusual time to visit as a student. I was absolutely amazed by what I found. Central Asia is not a region that's very well known. Luckily that's changing, but 25 years ago even less well known. And Uzbekistan was fantastic. The Silk Road cities were stunning. The cultural history, it revealed to me the great Islamic awakening that had happened starting in the 11th century, which I didn't know much about.
Well, prior to your current appointment, you have worked in several countries, including in Jordan, in Oman, in New York City, and in Georgia, and other parts of the world. Well, you have worked for more than 20 years for the United Nations. How do you think the United Nations has changed over this period?
Goodness, United Nations has changed in many ways, I would say. I joined the UN in 1997 in Georgia. I was based in Tbilisi and working extensively in Skhin Valley, which is in South Ossetia. And I think the UN has become a better employer over the course of the past 21 years, because the whole UN family has shifted itself to align to the principles and standards and norms that it is promoting among the member states. So we now have this amazing Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the UN as an organization, and it's not just one organization, obviously, it
has branches,
many
offices,
agencies, departments, specialized agencies have come together to work in the same direction. And what's most interesting to me as someone who's really grown up in my professional career inside the UN is that under our current UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, he has really managed to bring the whole family of UN agencies together to work to support Agenda 2030. And he's trying to ensure a deep reform of the UN so that we are able to stand up every day for the principles and for the standards that we are trying to support our countries where we work to also achieve. And this includes things like ensuring gender equality. It includes, for example, enabling people with disabilities to get positions within the UN. It includes having a mental health strategy for the first time in the UN. And these are things we're also advocating that governments do. Governments need to take more attention to mental health of their citizens and to have strategies in place for supporting school kids with mental health problems. Obviously, the UN also works on gender equality around the world, and so the UN needs to reflect that. Here in Uzbekistan, we are lucky. We have a completely gender equal UN team. There are 5 women and 5 men.
Cool. Equality.
Yes, heading the UN
mission in Uzbekistan.
UN agencies in Uzbekistan. There are 10 agencies represented here. And at the global level, people in my position, which is the UN resident coordinator, so the head of the UN team, we also achieved gender equality for the first time ever this year. The next step, I think, is to ensure that we have a better diversity base. So ensuring that people from every region of the world are reflected in UN teams. Because inclusion is at the very heart, and leaving no one behind is at the very heart of our Sustainable Development Goals.
Well, on 20th of October this year, the President of Uzbekistan signed a decree on the measures to implement National Development Goals, which is based on the Global Development Goals, SDGs, of the United Nations. Well, what do you think are the causes that's prompted the Uzbek government to adopt its own national development goals?
Well, first of all, let me say how tremendously pleased we are in the UN family that Uzbekistan has adopted its national sustainable development goals. This means Uzbekistan has really brought the global goals to national level and decided which priorities it needs to focus on. The resolution that was signed on 20 October empowers the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, to ensure that across the whole government, these national goals and targets are taken seriously. So it's really taking the next step from the summit in 2015, when the global goals were agreed, and putting them at the heart of Uzbekistan's national agenda. This is great because it also really puts the proof in the fact that the action strategy for development, the 5-year development plan that was adopted last year in 2017, that really is fully aligned to the global goals, and now we have a roadmap for the national goals and targets. If I may just tell you, I mean, some of the priority targets which I see reflected in the decree, for example, include a 2-fold decrease in poverty rates by 2030, a decrease by 1/3 in maternal mortality rates, a decrease by 1/2 in child mortality by 2030, and a 30% decrease in deaths from non-communicable diseases, such as cancer, such as cardiovascular, respiratory. But there's a whole range. That's just under the first few goals. But there's also, for example, a commitment to increase the share of renewable energy by 2030 and to have a substantial reduction in waste generation.
Recycling
reduction, you know, reducing use of plastics, and I know that there is a tax coming in on plastic bags next year, which I think is
January 1st.
A great sign. But there are also commitments to, for example, significantly reduce corruption, increase the transparency of the state. Now, much of this is already underway, as we have just mentioned, in the action strategy. But the action strategy is a 5-year strategy, and now we have a clear 12-year roadmap. And as part of the resolution, we will be developing individual roadmaps to 2030 for each Sustainable Development Goals supporting the government to produce these roadmaps, which in my view means that they will be much more likely to be successful. Because if you plan across a 12-year time frame to specific targets and you benchmark and monitor those targets, your success is likely to be much higher.
In 2017, when the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, paid a visit to Uzbekistan, he visited Moynak.
Yes.
And said that this problem, the RLC, is one of the most problematic issues of the 21st century, and we should learn our lessons from this issue. What are the plans of the United Nations to tackle the issue in the future?
Okay. Well, since 2012, the UN family in Uzbekistan has been working under a joint program on the RLC together with the government of Uzbekistan, and that has involved nearly $10 million over the course of the last 8 years of investments in different ways to enhance the living standards and the opportunities for people affected by the RLC crisis. Now, let me give you some concrete statistics, if I may.
Okay.
So, in terms of income generation, over 200 demonstration plots and business projects have been supported, which have benefited over 130,000 people living in the affected area. 1,500 health workers have been trained on family planning, mother and child health and reproductive health. 143 rural health clinics have been provided with equipment. 1,644 community health workers have been mobilized to increase awareness of 128,000 people on various diseases, including tuberculosis. In terms of infrastructure, which is a major challenge in Pakistan, over 44,000 rural people have improved access to drinking water, irrigation water, electricity, and health and education facilities. Now, I think that's a success.
Over the period, yes.
I think it's not perfect, but if you take it in conjunction with the significant investment by the government of Uzbekistan through the state program of the RLC on infrastructure. I don't know if you've been to KUN.UZ recently, but there has been a lot of infrastructural investments, both in KUN.UZ and in some of the smaller towns of Pakistan. So I would say that there is a really strong basis of practical results that we can see. Now, what we don't see is the RLC getting bigger.
Well, as per the report of the World Bank, over 9 million people do not have access to water services in Uzbekistan, or they have to rely on self-supply. How to improve the situation in Uzbekistan, how to improve water management, water system?
Well, UNDP is the main UN actor on water in Uzbekistan. We work very closely with many other partners, including the World Bank, GIZ, the Swiss, the European Union. And UNDP's global experience talks of 3 priorities for water management. The first is addressing inequality of access to safe drinking water. The second is ensuring effective governance of water. And the third is ensuring better attention to integrated nature-based solutions. And that means, for example, when I told you that the water from the Amudarya no longer reaches the RLC, it does reach wetlands around Moynak. Again, if you get to Moynak, there's no water. But before Moynak, there's some rather impressive wetlands, because some of the water from the end of the river is reaching this area. How do we preserve and conserve those natural solutions to ensuring water management? And global experience shows that nature-based solutions can often provide some of the most significant gains. Now, here in Uzbekistan, what we've been doing practically to support those 3 priorities that I outlined is working with some pilots in specific rural areas. And again, I come back to this issue. The challenges faced by people in Tashkent are very different, as you pointed out. In a village called Gulistan in rural Fergana, we have provided safe drinking water for 4,500 community people. And this is a pilot to show what can be done when we work together with the Hokimiyat, with the community, with the farmers and irrigating irrigation models. It's really important to ensure that the community users have a voice when dealing with the other users, because majority of water in Uzbekistan is used for irrigation, as I'm sure you know well. But the second thing we're doing is on governance. So we have a number of these pilots in Samarkand region, in Navoiy region, Fergana region. And the second thing we're doing is on the water governance question. So how do you make water, which has traditionally been seen as a free asset, to become a precious asset? We know that water in Uzbekistan is in deficit. If you look at the statistics on water use, the fact that 80% of Uzbekistan's water comes from outside the country, from neighboring countries.
Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan.
Indeed.
Yes.
And the fact that quite a lot of that water, it varies depending on where you get the data, but around 40% is lost due to the state of the irrigation systems in Uzbekistan. And when you look at the population demographics, you know that water is going to become equally scarce. I mean, not equally, increasingly scarce over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So it's very important to ensure that the governance system for water and that the tariff and metering system for water are basically at global standards levels. So we've been working on a pilot with the Hokimiyat in Navoiy region to pilot water metering, starting a few years ago, and to really share those lessons with the central government so that the rollout of water metering systems in Uzbekistan is improved. We've also been working on advice to the Ministry, well, it used to be the Ministry of Agriculture and Water, but now the Ministry of Water, on legislation around water usage, because what is absolutely clear is the value of water needs to be raised in people's minds, in people's budgets, and in industry's budgets. It needs to be understood that wasting water can no longer be a possibility. And this is something that many, many countries face. I was working in Jordan before I came here. It's an extremely water-short country. And the UN is also working in Jordan to see how to improve public awareness of the preciousness and the value of water.
The next question is about the construction of a nuclear power plant in Uzbekistan. In cooperation with the Russian Federation, the Uzbek government has launched the construction works of the first ever nuclear power plant in Uzbekistan. On October 18th, 19th, the current year, the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, paid a visit to Tashkent. And jointly with his counterpart, Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev, the President of Uzbekistan, they have launched these construction works. Do you think this is a reliable method of ensuring affordable energy for the people of Uzbekistan?
I'm not so qualified to talk about nuclear energy, but what I can talk about is the very big challenge that Uzbekistan faces in its current energy consumption pattern. So 90% of as I understand it, of current energy consumed in Uzbekistan is from fossil fuels. The majority from natural gas and the rest from coal and oil. And while there is a bit of hydropower, essentially the rest of the options available, whether it's nuclear or solar or wind power or biofuel, those options are essentially currently negligible. Now, what's also clear, and I was just giving you some data about energy and environment targets under the national SDGs, is that the government has a commitment to significantly increase the share of renewable energy in the country's energy mix. And this is vital for achieving also the targets that have been agreed to under the recently ratified Paris Agreement. So Uzbekistan committed to reduce by 10% its greenhouse gas emissions
by 2030.
By 2030. And this won't be possible without a shift away from some of the climate change impacts that are currently underway. Now, we think that, we know that a large amount of investment is needed in the energy sector. Some data shows that around 30% of energy is lost in the transmission networks at the moment. But in addition, we know that residential housing is an enormous share, up to 3/4 of the current consumption of energy is in residential housing, and up to half of greenhouse gas emissions are from residential buildings. Now, so the issue of energy efficiency and of greenhouse gas emissions, I mean, they're separate but very much related, is why the UN is heavily involved, and UNDP specifically, in supporting more energy efficient rural housing. Now, as to the nuclear power plant, I think it's very important investment by Uzbekistan, and I understand that the UN arm that deals with nuclear energy, which is the International Atomic Energy Authority, will be involved in ensuring the relevant standards are met, particularly in a seismic risk country.
Yes.
It's very important to ensure the very highest standards and to have certification from the global bodies on this. But I think that will be the main point I would like to stress is the importance of improved energy efficiency, and that the real focus needs to be on diversification, including into green renewable energy sources. And we're working now on a pilot with the Hakim of Tashkent for potential green public transport. And these kinds of pilots are really important to help change policy, change approaches, and reduce Uzbekistan's energy consumption.
Thank you. Oh, you have mentioned about gender equality issues, right? Well, we know that this issue is perceived differently by the Eastern and Western cultures. For example, the people in the East treat women differently compared to the people living in the West, right? How do you think are the possibilities of ensuring equality between men and women, taking the above-mentioned fact into consideration?
Okay. I would like to challenge you again.
Okay, yes.
Gender stereotypes are not unique to one country, one culture, or one geography.
Working conditions for women, for example, in Uzbekistan is perceived differently. That's what I'm asking.
Gender stereotypes are a challenge globally. The UN has adopted Sustainable
SDGs.
Development Goal
Yes.
5, which is about gender equality. And in every country, including the country I'm from, the United Kingdom, women face different barriers than men. Men face barriers as well, but women face different barriers than men based on their gender, to accessing jobs, accessing educational opportunities, becoming productive agents in society, access to decision making. So I think the question of the power structures between men and women, and women's ability to become productive economic agents and to contribute to societal change and to policies, there are structural barriers in most countries of the world. So let's start by saying this is not a challenge that is unique to one country, one region, or one hemisphere. Of course, they differ from country to country, but I don't think you can make generalizations. I think what we have to recognize and acknowledge, and this is something that Antonio Guterres, our Secretary General, is extremely committed to, we have to acknowledge that in order for the world to achieve prosperity and dignity, then all parts of society need to be able to access their full potential. Whether that is as the Chief Executive Officer of UZ, or whether that is as a mother of 6 educated children who also holds a part-time job doing a small business enterprise from her home, That's not the issue. It's being able to access opportunity. Yeah?
Yeah.
So the choice should be there. And what the UN is trying to do is to say, lift the legislative barriers and lift the public perception barriers which are preventing those choices from being made. We are not telling every man you have to go and become a preschool teacher, and every woman has to go and become a scientific engineer. But any man who would like to become a preschool teacher and any woman
be given opportunities,
should be able to access those opportunities. Yes. We also have provided research, for example, we were in a meeting with the Minister of Labour last week, and we provided some UNDP research showing that having a university degree doubled a Uzbek girl's chance of finding a job. Doubled her chance of finding a job. For men in Uzbekistan, having a degree does not make a significant impact. It does on the salary, but on getting a job, there is not much difference. But for a woman, it doubles her chances. So, for example, we're advocating that the barriers preventing girls from getting tertiary education opportunities, from getting into university, should be amended. But I also want to say that gender equality is not only about ensuring equality of opportunity for women. In Uzbekistan, men have a challenge, and that challenge is that they are dying earlier and younger because of unequal healthcare services and because of stereotypes which prevent men from seeking earlier diagnosis and treatment for non-communicable diseases. So the analysis that the World Health Organization has shared with the government has shown that we need to overcome these stereotypes as well as to do gender sensitive health programming so that men's health is prioritized and given the specific challenges men face in relation to the non-communicable diseases problems in Uzbekistan. So I think we have a very strong basis on which to work because the President, as you know, upgraded the responsibilities of the Women's Committee of Uzbekistan.
Yes.
The constitution of Uzbekistan is very clear that men and women have equal rights and opportunities. And what is needed is to go further, and that's what the government is seeking to do, and look with a very detailed eye, based on the data and the evidence. What are the challenges that need to be tackled?
Maybe the cultural issues.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, in Uzbekistan, men do not normally want their wife to work. This may be the preventing issue of women being involved in government organizations and other public services.
Indeed, in many countries,
the problem is the same.
This challenge of traditional roles and the roles assigned to mothers and to fathers are very different. I think it's important not to try to sweep out these roles overnight. That doesn't work. What's important is to provide the opportunity that allows those women who can get jobs to get the jobs. We just supported 248 young Uzbek girls to go through a coding camp with mentors and learning how to code and design applications. And I was really thrilled and a little bit surprised, but I shouldn't have been, that one of the teams of 4 girls made it through to the global final in San Francisco, competing against teams of girls from Nigeria, from India, from the United States, from Canada. And it's about providing opportunity. These girls are now inspired, they're excited, they want to go to Inha University when they're 18 and study tech, or to Tashkent University of IT. Because they've been given a chance and an opportunity. Now, it doesn't mean that they might not decide that when they have children, they balance designing new applications and coding from home with their kids. Or maybe they will have a spouse who will decide to look after the kids a little bit more and they will do the main work. but providing that opportunity for changing roles and the opportunity for girls to contribute to the economy. This country, 60% is young people, and of that 60%, 50% is female. Half the country is obviously female.
Yes.
For Uzbekistan to achieve the really ambitious priorities set out in the Action Strategy for Development and in the National Sustainable Development Goals, harnessing the potential of half the population is a priority of women. And this can be done in ways that are sensitive to traditional perspectives. But yes, we need to raise awareness that women should not and do not have to only have one choice in life. I'm a mother of 4 children. I have a successful career. You'll have to tell me when you meet my children if they seem healthy and balanced and well supported by their mother. But you know, I like to think that they are happy, balanced and well supported children.
Happy to hear that. Religious issues. I mean, the freedom of religion in Uzbekistan. Following the Mr. Ahmad Shahid's visit to Tashkent, Uzbekistan, what changed or observed in the country, do you think, in freedom of religion or belief? For example, do you think that freedom of religion is provided indeed in the country for Muslims and representatives of other religions in Uzbekistan? Equal opportunities for all.
Okay. The visit of the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief last year was a breakthrough from our perspective because it had been, I think, 11 or 12 years since previous UN Special Rapporteur was invited. And these experts are completely independent. They are people with a deep expertise of their field, and they come and provide a fully independent perspective on the mandate that they have, which in this case is freedom of religion or belief. What was important about Dr. Shahid's visit was really that he was given full access wherever he asked to go, including to the Jaslik prison in Karakoram, Pakistan, which is quite a well-known prison. He was given ability to meet with all religious minorities that he sought to meet, and he was able to come up with a very detailed report and set of recommendations, which the government accepted, and the Parliament in May this year adopted a roadmap to take forward those recommendations. And those recommendations range from changes to the legislature, changes to the criminal code, changes to public awareness about the meaning of religious tolerance and the meaning of freedom of religion. You know, there's a lot of very significant proposals that were put forward, and now the government has a practical roadmap on how it should take forward these issues. We have seen a number of other positive developments, including the removal from the blacklist of around 16,000
convicts.
Not convicts, people who were suspected of having extremist sympathies. They were not convicted of anything, but they were on a blacklist for being potentially extremist. We also saw the amnesty of, I think, 760 prisoners who were detained on religious grounds last year, around the Constitution Day. And we have definitely seen a much wider dialogue in society about the role of religion, about the history of religions in Central Asia. And Uzbekistan has a long and very rich legacy of multi-faith harmony.
Yes.
This is one of the first treatises I'm aware of on Hinduism was written by Al-Biruni, I think.
Yes, in the 11th century.
In the 11th century. And, you know, this was very early on an Islamic intellectual writing an academic treatise on Hinduism. Very interesting, you know, look at what was happening in Europe at the time. It wasn't pretty in terms of religious tolerance. So I would say, you know, there's a very strong historical basis. There's a lot of challenges as well. We are in a region which is, well, Uzbekistan is a very stable country. We're in a region which has some challenges in terms of the situation in Afghanistan, obviously, in particular. And so I think the increase in healthy debate over the last year that I've witnessed in Uzbekistan on the role of religion in society, on what qualifies as extremism, what doesn't, and the government's will to address the freedom of religion or belief recommendations are important and positive signals. There's still some way to go, and we still receive reports of challenges from some corners. But I think you know, that it's important to look at the positive side, and it's important that civil society adds its voice to this debate.
Well, the last question is a personal one. Where do you see yourself after 5 years' time? And if you had a chance to choose a place to work by yourself, what country would you choose? Where would you like to work as a UN representative, if you had a chance to choose?
Okay, well, I applied for the job in Uzbekistan. And I have to say, I think I'm the luckiest UN representative, because not only is this a great place to live and a great place to live with my family, but also it's such an exciting time to be in Uzbekistan. You know, it's not often you get the chance when the government is going through such a transformation, and that transformation is aligned to where the UN is seeking to provide support. So it's a really great time to be here. Unfortunately, I can't be here forever. The usual term for someone in my position is 4 years. Where I go next, I don't know. But you know, for me, what motivates me every day is to work for greater prosperity, for greater dignity, and for greater sustainability around the world. And I feel like in Uzbekistan, the UN is a good partner to the transformations that are ongoing. And so it's a very motivating time to be here. I hope that my next duty station will be as equally motivating.
Thank you very much for allotting your precious time for the interview. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.